All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Screencast Observation Overview Part 2, where I dive into my example materials that hopefully will help you understand these observation assignments a little bit better. So I'm clicking right here, the example assignment observation on the robber bridegroom. So this is exactly what your observation assignments are going to look like, although they'll all be slightly different. This one is modeled after the Red Riding Hood one that you need to complete. So I'll just go through this real quickly. You're going to see in a second the Robber Bridegroom is a story of the Bluebeard type. If you don't know Bluebeard yet, you'll become very familiar with Bluebeard this semester. It's a story, Bluebeard stories are where a woman is kind of set up in into an arranged marriage with a rich guy who seems like he's going to be a good match, but ends up not being so good. And so the Robber Bridegroom is no exception there. So what I'm asking for in this example assignment, and I would like to point this out, do not actually do this assignment. This is just an example, although you need to know the story a little bit for it to make sense. So it makes sense to read the assignment before you read the story so you know what you're looking for. In this story, we're looking for observations about the bride's character traits or motivations, observations about the bridegroom. Bridegroom is the male in the story, that's her husband to be, and then commenting on the overall meaning of the story beyond the moral. I'm actually going to go change this. This should say noticing the bride's character traits or motivation and noticing the bridegroom's traits or motivations. At any rate, so reading the story, all you have to do is pay attention to who the bride is and what she's like, and who the bridegroom is and what he's like, and then try to find some way to move beyond the moral of the story. So I will let you read this on your own after you watch this video. For now, I'm going to click next and go on to the next thing. So this is the online text of the Robber Bridegroom. Pause this real quick. So that link takes you to this online text of the Robber Bridegroom from a website that I really like. It's called Folk Texts by a guy who used to work at the University of Pittsburgh named D.L. Ashleman. He translated a bunch of these stories. This one is from the Brothers Grimm. You're probably familiar with the Brothers Grimm. So after you read this story, maybe pause the video now and read the story, or come back to it or whatever, but I just want to continue with this overview. So it's not very long. It only goes to right about there, and those are some notes on the sources. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and take you to my observation overview. So I'm kind of rushing a little bit. Once I get better with these screencasts, I'll do some editing and I'll clean up the audio and I'll make sure that the captioning all works correctly. But for now, I just wanted to get these posted as soon as possible. I have taught online before quite a few times, but I'm trying to do an even better job this time. So I'm introducing myself to new technology and new ways of teaching and everything, and I hope it works for you. Hope these videos are helpful. At any rate, after you read the text of the Robber Bridegroom, click here to load a PDF of some example annotations. I'll let you go through these on your own as well, but all I did was copy and paste the text into a Word document, read the text, and record what I thought here, or what I noticed here that might be related to character traits. So I noticed, I thought it was interesting that the father kind of had control of the daughter, that the guy she was marrying was rich. I noticed here, one of the first comments about the bride is that she's not super stoked on her new marriage. This could mean that she is not loyal to her father. It could also mean that she's independent. I talk a little bit more about that later. I note here that the new husband is kind of authoritative and bossy. He doesn't ask the wife to visit, he tells her. A note here that his house is in the dark woods. That's never a good thing. here I note that the young bride is feeling a little bit uneasy. She's not sure exactly why she's feeling uneasy. She's frightened, although she didn't know why. I note here that she could perhaps be thought of as clever because she marks the path where she's going into the forest. Obviously, I'm going fast, but I just wanted to give you an example of the kind of notes you might take for yourself. You don't have to take notes in the same way. You could print out the story and do it in paper. You could have another document open and just write notes as you think of them, whatever you want to do. So continuing down here, on the next page of the story, I think it's interesting that a bird tells her what is really up with the guy. She warns him that he's actually a murderer. In the house, there's a very old woman kind of doing the same thing. Kind of a disturbing scene coming up here where the men show back up and with another woman, and they apparently are going to murder her and eat her. I will let you read that. And again, as I just keep going through the story, I notice different things. The men kind of seem gullible. I don't end up commenting on that later. But the old woman here, the one that she met downstairs, she's clever. She and the bride together are both clever. They work together to escape this situation with these horrible men. Her here, I make a note that her plan with leaving herself a new path out of the forest pays off. Again, that seems like she's clever and resourceful. Then there's a scene where she basically ends up at her own wedding and she retells the story of everything that she saw in the basement. And then the bad guy gets his just desserts. He goes to court and gets executed for his bad deeds. So throughout all of this, I'm looking for examples in the text that might relate to these character traits for the first two parts of my observation. Like I said, again, the last part of the observation is going to ask me to draw some conclusions about the story. So if I move on to the next thing here, this is what an example observation looks like. So here you can see the exact formatting that I want. I'm going to scroll through this a little bit. I don't want you to be intimidated at the moment. It's a little over 2 pages long. Actually, it's closer to 3. Oh, it's 3 pages. No, it's on the 3rd page, so it's 2 plus. I'm not expecting you to necessarily write that much, but you may well write that much. I wrote in the assignment sheet that these take a long time, and this is where some of your instruction takes place. So by having this structured way of looking at a story, you're doing the work of the class. So it's not just about turning in this document and completing it. It's about learning to read and analyze literature in a structured way, which is going to be central to this class and central to your essays. So I'll just walk through this document real quick, which you should definitely use as a model for your Red Riding Hood observation. Here's my name. I am the student here. I'm also the professor here. That's strange. Here we are in English 123 on June 17th. Here's the title. It can be very simple. It's just Observation, the Robber Bridegroom. You can add more to that if you want with a dash or whatever. So here's the header that's required. Noticing the bride's character traits or motivations. This is from the assignment sheet. It's exactly the same. You have the option of adding a little bit more here if you like after this colon here. So the traits that I chose to talk about were that she was either disloyal or independent, depending on how you looked at it, intuitive, and resourceful. So my first paragraph here is how I see her, how I notice her, how I notice details that seem to imply she's either disloyal or independent. In this bit of text here, I basically just make this statement and I don't explain a lot. The reason that I want you to do that is because I want you to get used to being very clear with yourself about when you're noticing something and when you're explaining the thing that you notice. In your essays, those two things can be a little bit more mixed together, and they will be naturally in your writing. just like they are in professional writers writing. But for the purposes of these observation, I want you to keep them separate so you can be very clear about what you're doing. Here, I present information on how the girl is intuitive. And the example that I cite is on her way to her husband's house, she's frightened, although she didn't not know why. And that matches up with one of my annotations earlier. The third trait that I talk about is that she is resourceful right here. And the example that I use is in order to mark the path, she filled her pockets full of peas and lentils, which she scatters along the ground. So format your observations in this way. Header here, indented first paragraph with a trait, indented second paragraph with a trait, indented third paragraph with a trait. All of these should be complete sentences. They should all have transitions, and we can work on those things as we need during the course of the class. After you introduce these traits, explain a little bit about them. And your explanation section is going to be a little bit longer. So here, I talk about how the daughter in the story is not excited about being married off to her bridegroom. In this paragraph, I elaborate on that. I explain what I mean there, and just to make it perfectly clear to the reader what I'm saying. And I do the same thing here in this paragraph with the idea of intuition. And I do it here with the bride being resourceful. The next paragraph, or the next section, is the same. We have a new heading, noticing the bridegroom's character traits or motivations, and then I added 3 traits here. He's authoritative, immoral, and secretive. I'm in 3 short paragraphs right here. I describe the things that I notice, my observations, and then I do the same thing here with the explanation in the same order. So you want these to be parallel. First talk about how he's authoritative, then immoral, then secretive, and we do that here, here, and here, and then I explain them in the same order here. I explain why I think he's authoritative here. I explain why he's immoral. In fact, he's pretty evil here, which is pretty obvious. And then here I talk about the idea that he's secretive, and when he is exposed to society, that's his undoing, is his secret becoming out in the open. This commentary section is a little bit different. So in what I ask you to do in Red Riding Hood, and what I asked myself to do here in this example material, was to try to imagine what the moral of the story is and then move beyond it. It's a really common way to think about fairy tales. What's the moral of the story? What does this story teach us? In this story, it might be for the young woman to trust her intuition. But beyond that, the story might be saying something about marriage in general, or arranged marriage in particular, that husbands might have secrets about their nature and then potentially dangerous ones. So this part, the explanation here, is a little bit looser. It's a little bit more speculation. I don't know quite what I think about this story yet or what it means. So in this paragraph, I just speculate about some different things. It seems important that the man is described as rich, and that's all we really know about him. Maybe it's a mistake to go after someone just for their wealth instead of their character. Another observation is that going into an arranged marriage might be like entering into a dangerous foreign land for the woman. She has little control over it, and she doesn't really know what to expect once she gets home with the guy. Hopefully he's not a murderer, but unfortunately in some of these stories he is. And then I had an interesting side observation here that I thought it was interesting that the woman had help, the young bride had help from another woman and a talking bird who could also represent a woman. When we're talking about traditional gender roles and traditional gender traits, I think one is that women form community very easily, and they're very likely to work together. So in this section, I just expanded on what I thought the story meant. This might be analogous to kind of a conclusion in essays. Finally, in terms of formatting, I wanted to point out I do want you to include a works cited page. I can give you some more information about that or help if you need it, but I did provide a link. and then I want you to make sure to include page numbers.